In this video I'm going to show you how to create a loop in geometric shapes grid, similar to this. Hi, I'm Adam Bennett, this is the video shop. This is an exercise I often get students to do when they're just starting out, as it's good practice for learning some of the basics. It should help familiarise you with basic animation timing, animating paths, exploring repeaters and other shape layer modifiers, looping animation seamlessly, and experimenting with layer modes. Also, there's no pressure to produce amazing animation. If I solo some of these individual animations, you'll see they're nothing special, but all of them combined produces something nice, which as a beginner you might be happy to showcase. Even if you don't, you'll be learning along the way, and have a collection of mini animations you might want to draw from for a future project. There's nothing particularly advanced or complicated in this video, so this is definitely suitable for beginners. In the first part, I'll show you how to create a couple of simple animated loops. This will be a step-by-step that you can follow along if you like. In the second part, I'll talk about a few of the animations in this loop and touch on some of the techniques you might want to try for yourself. This is more about coming up with your own animation and design ideas and exploring for yourself what works and what doesn't. The other good thing about this exercise is it's something you can add to every now and again. You don't need to sit down and get it all done in one go.
It will be done now!
And because we're animating simple shapes, you can draw inspiration from anywhere. Obviously, feel free to collect reference, but you might be out and about somewhere and spot something that inspires you. Maybe the carpet in a hotel or the pattern on a dress. Sketch some designs, come up with your own animation ideas. Those sketches could lead to something interesting, or it doesn't work out and you abandon it. And that's fine, it's all part of the process. If you want to look at the creation of any of these in more detail, I've uploaded the complete workflow to my sister channel, the Video Shop Long Play. You can browse the chapters for any particular part that you want to know how it's done, and there's a project file you can download for free on Gumroad. Links for both in the description below. Oh, and stay tuned to the end for a bonus tip on how to improve these kind of animations.
Yawn.
Okay, let's get started. Let's create a new comp, and I'm going to make it 1000 by 1000 pixels, frame rate 24, duration's 20, doesn't need to be 20, but that's fine, we'll leave that. Classic 3D renderer, and we'll OK that, and I'm going to move it into the pre-comps folder because it's going to be a pre-comp. We'll have a circle, so grab the ellipse tool, double click on it, turn off the fill and leave the stroke, and bump the stroke up to say 20, turn off toggle transparency, just going to change the background colour to white. We could scale this up or animate the ellipse path size here. Doesn't matter which way we do it. So I'm just going to press S for scale. Before I do that, I'm going to change the time code to frames by control clicking here. It's just going to make things easier when we create loops to see how many frames it animates over. So I'm going to go to 50 frames and set a keyframe, and then go to frame 0 and set it 0. That's pretty basic. The stroke could maybe be a bit thicker, so I'm going to press U to reveal the properties that we've just messed around with, and the stroke width, we want it to sort of animate off, so we'll start it, let's have it, let's say 50, maybe even 100, and then we want it to resolve off to nothing. Yeah, that looks okay. Preview it. It's going to be a bit linear, so we'll press F9 on these keyframes, and this is just personal preference, whatever you want to have on yours. Ease this off, F9 again, F9, I don't want the stroke cropped off the edge here, so maybe just bring it in slightly. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to put a marker on the layer where it's finishing. So here, so the asterisk key, and just because I find it easier naming layers, circle. Okay, then you duplicate it, and I'm going to see what it looks like having them duplicated every 20 frames. So this is why it's easier working with frames rather than time code. We can now check that we've got a seamless loop by going from frame 0. And I'm going to pull over a comp marker from the right here. So that's looping and it's okay, that'll do. So what I'm going to do is call this, let's say, loop 1, but then in brackets I put 40, which is the number of frames that it loops over. Actually, might. Or even, it's actually even 20, isn't it? Yeah. So if you're really new to After Effects and you don't want to deal with expressions, which we're going to look at shortly, you could just duplicate a whole load of these. That's if you don't want to use expressions, but what's easier to make these loop seamlessly and have more control over the speed of them is when we pop these into a new comp. So let's make our grid comp 1920 by 1080, and we'll call this geometric grid. So we pull that in. Actually, now I think of it, let's give it a background. To loop it, if you want to use expressions, what you can do is enable time remapping, Control Alt T, and then if we go to frame 20, set a keyframe there and delete this last keyframe, and then add the loop out cycle expression. So you can see here in red these numbers, that's the frame that we're on. So when we go past it, it's going back to beginning. So we've got a seamless loop. Now the good thing about doing this is if you want it to be slower, you could always go to say frame 30 and drag that over, and it's just going to loop every 30 frames. The only thing to be conscious of is when you've got lots of different looping elements, is you want the whole thing to loop at some point. So you just need to be conscious of all of the different loop durations adding up to an amount where they all loop at the same time at some point. So you can loop the whole thing seamlessly if you want to. So actually I'm going to rename this so it's 20. So let's create another one and we'll go new comp. And this will be loop 2. We'll add a new square. Get rid of the stroke. Fill. And let's call that square 01. P for position. I'm going to go into frame 50 again, and this will be our end position. Add in, and then we want it to come from over here, and the top corner will be 1500 by minus 500. I'm going to use below. For this, you don't need to, and apply that, and then just check that animation. It's maybe a bit slow, so let's do it over 40. Okay, and I'm going to set a marker on the keyframe, asterisk again, and then this one will be a white fill, so I'm going to make that none. This one will have to be yellow because there's no white, and you change the color and then move this, and let's have it over, let's see what 10 frames looks like, so drag that over, duplicate both of those. Again, so at frame 0, wait, so I want I'm pulling it over so that the first one is animated on completely, because what we don't want is any transparency. So we've got the first keyframe there, okay, and then in theory this will be a perfect loop. So from this frame to frame 20 again, just bring these across again. So having these comp markers, you can just easily toggle 1, 2 just to check, and then set the end of the work area to 1 frame before, N for the end of the work area. That's a bit frenetic, perhaps. So what I can do is press U for the keyframes and just grab all of these end keyframes, and I'm going to shift them along by 10. So pressing Alt, Shift, and then the right arrow key, and then they jump across 10, and then maybe another 10. These are all staggered over, what do we have it, 20 frames. So it still should loop seamlessly. We just need to shift them all across again now. Here. So select all of them, move across. I need to make a couple more duplicates. Okay, so the loop duration is still the same. That'll do. So again, that's a 20 loop, so I'm going to put in brackets 20, and the good thing is now I've already got this one, so I can just move this across, duplicate it, and then Alt replace this one. So now we've got 2 looping elements. Let's look at a few of the animations in this loop. These won't be step-by-step walkthroughs, but you've got the workflow video to refer to if you want. You might find it easier to work in black and white, so you're totally focusing on the design and animation. You can tint the comps to add colour when you create your grid. Or if you add colour, you could expression control them as I've done here. Every animation comp using colour is expression controlled to these colours here, so if I want to change them I only have to swap them out in the master pre-comp. I made the comps 1000 by 1000 pixels. This makes for easy maths when you create your grid. These are pretty simple animations with shape layers with little or no effects, so it won't kill your computer to have larger comps than you need and scale them down. Animations like this are good for practicing basic techniques such as timing. I jotted down a few ideas and referred to some of them when I came to animate this loop. And yes, I realised they looked like I sketched them while I was on a plane that was crashing. This is literally just a bouncing ball, and I haven't even given it much personality here to be honest. And this one here is animated with just rotation and a little bounce. For tips on animating physics, you can watch my tutorial 5 tips for animating dynamics in After Effects. This one is made by animating the path. I experimented with it to see if it would be more interesting doubling up the animation, using it as a pre-comp and setting it to the add layer mode. It didn't quite work for me, but I used a similar technique here. This one started out as a very simple wipe effect, but then pre-comping it and playing around with the layer modes I eventually landed on this, using exclusion. It's probably a bit busy compared to the other animations, but I left it in anyway. This one here I'm going to call the vertigo. It's a square with the fill turned off and just a stroke. I've added a repeater and keyframed the rotation and scale of that repeater. Then to add some interest, I've scaled and rotated the layer itself, so it's not so static. We'll explore this kind of process more in the bonus tip. Lastly, this very simple one uses the zigzag modifier to curve the edges of a triangle. I would definitely explore modifiers if you try this exercise, as they're a good way of creating interesting shapes and animations. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a bonus tip for improving animations like this, aka Adam's desperate attempt to get you to watch the whole of the video, or at least skip through to this bit. So when I was recording this tutorial, I was looking at this animation and remembering how long it took me to animate this square. Something that should have been simple, the square rotating round with the corners remaining true to the edges. I spent ages on it and it was really fiddly, and then I thought there's got to be an easy way, and some of you are probably way ahead of me, but if you just add the corner pin effect to that square, you can keyframe it, and then we can just pull these round. This isn't the bonus tip, by the way, I'm just showing you. So the bonus tip is don't be an idiot. And then if we adjust the values here, weirdly, there's probably a good reason that I'm not aware of, but even though those values are true to the 1000 by 1000 square pixels, you get this white line here which you can sort of cheat fix, and then we get that, which takes about 30 seconds compared to the 5 or 10 minutes I spent doing it with scale and rotation keyframes. So that's not the bonus tip, but the bonus tip is just get one thing animated really well. So don't feel like you have to animate something that's as complicated as this, for example, straight away. Just experiment with a basic shape, get some nicely keyframed animation on it, and then maybe think, okay, so finesse the timing, make sure it loops. And then what I did was I set a marker on here. It's in the wrong place, yeah, there. So that marker's where the square is sort of halfway through its rotation. Then maybe duplicate the element that you've animated and see if you can get something interesting from that. So what I did was created a white duplicate of it and then duplicated a bunch of those and just adjusted the scale of all of them, as you can see here. And then if we stagger the timing of them, you get something like this. And you might look at that and go, yep, that's fine, that's quite interesting. But then you might want to push it even further and think, can I make it a little bit more dynamic and interesting? So I just spent a couple more minutes, created even more duplicates, but then parented them all to a master null. If we scale that up and down, then let's bring the graph editor in here. Then adjust the timings of that scale. And by the way, we've got loop expressions on all of these. So I can move this to adjust the timing sort of back and forth. And if I toggle between 1 and 2, it's still going to loop perfectly, no matter where these keyframes are, as long as they're in front. I'm just going to move them back to where they were. So you get something that's even trippier and maybe a little bit more interesting than just say this, which is also fine. So yeah, the bonus tip is just get that one thing animated well, and then just experiment with, you can even go into effects and have a look at, say, the mirror effect or kaleidoscope, or pre-comp some assets and then rotate them, duplicate them, lay them on top of each other, that sort of thing. And that's it. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.